Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns 24/7, joined as always by our fearless leader, the managing editor of Horns 24/7, the one and only Taylor Estes. It is Monday of
Yes, sir.
Iowa State week. And Taylor, I come away from Steve Sarkisian's press conference and the players' press conferences today, wondering if these guys have figured it out, wondering if they have the resolve that I wrote about today in the Morning Brew. Because when you lose 3 straight games almost exactly the same way, and it's, double-digit lead, you play well enough to get the double-digit lead, the play script is working, the defense is turning the other team over. Big plays are happening. Casey Thompson's hitting Xavier Worthy for a touchdown. You've quieted their crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to the fourth quarter and you suddenly start giving up big plays in the running game. Receivers are still dropping passes. At some point, someone's got to stand up and say, hey, guess what? Enough is enough.
Right.
We're good
A
enough to
vocal
win.
leader needs to step up right now.
Yeah, whether it's the coach, the strength coach, the defensive line leader, somebody, everybody has got to stand up and say, this is it. We're going to take out all of our you-know-what on Iowa State this week, and we're leaving Ames with a win, and
Right.
that's it.
And Chip, in my opinion, it has to be Casey Thompson. Like at some point, I know he's still, somewhat green as a starting quarterback, but your starting quarterback needs to be that guy. And, Steve Sarkisian talked last week about how if Bijan Robinson wants to be a vocal leader, he absolutely can because he does everything right. Well, from everything we hear about Casey Thompson does all the work. He puts in the extra work. He watches so much film. I don't know if he has a personal life, probably because all his life is football. And so if he's the guy that does everything right, it needs to be Casey, in my opinion. And because somebody at this point has to. I mean, does Texas want to go to a bowl game? Or do they want to be the program who in the first year of a head coaching change doesn't go to a bowl game? When does that happen at Texas? If ever. You don't want to be that team. And Casey Thompson needs to be that leader, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think Casey's trying to be, he said today, I said, are you, what do you say to Marcus Washington and Joshua Moore? Does this team have a number 3 receiver behind Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I got to be positive with those guys because, they've been positive with me, but it's beyond just the offense. It's
Right.
It's everybody. And it's where's the fire coming from? I used to always ask this question when Mac Brown was the coach, because Mac, super nice guy, hired really good coaches around him, wasn't afraid to go hire Will Muschamp or Gene Chizik. But I always had to ask the question, where's the edge coming from? Because his teams were soft.
Yeah.
And the one thing I'll say under Tom Herman, is crazy as that guy was, the crazy-eyed drill sergeant, his teams feared him and they played tough and they played physical.
I don't know if they feared him. I just think they hated him, to
Okay.
be honest.
Hated him,
But
and he
use
was
the hate fuel to
right,
fuel
and
them.
he was willing to wear that.
Right.
He was willing to be the hated guy, and whether he balanced that good cop, bad cop well enough or not, who knows? But his teams played physical. They were always in every game. They played tough, and they gutted out wins late.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that was Sam Ellinger. Some of it was Sam Ellinger having to gut it out late because he didn't play well enough early in the game. But
Or
whatever
no
you
one
want to
else stepped
say,
up. Yeah.
they stepped up and beat Oklahoma State last year against all odds, right? They beat Texas Tech last year against all odds, down 15 with 3:13 left. They came back and won. This year, they get up double digits, and you almost look at the scoreboard and go, uh-oh, they're about to turn into a pumpkin.
Yeah.
And that is top down. That's
Mhm.
top down. That the fire has to come from the coaching staff, and then it has to come from player to player. And where's that resolve? Because you're good enough to get up on these teams. You're good enough to score 48 against Oklahoma. You're
Right.
good enough to go up 17-3 against Oklahoma State, to lead by 11 in the third quarter, to lead by double digits in the third quarter of all three of these games, and then you fold in the
Mhm.
fourth quarter. At some point, you have to look inside and say, enough.
Yeah.
Enough. I'm sick of it. Are you guys sick of it? I'm sick of being asked about it. I'm sick of living it. And I just think back to 2013, Taylor. I think of when Texas went to Oklahoma, everyone was ready for OU to serve as Mac Brown's pallbearers, and a somewhat weak-minded team smashed Oklahoma for 3.5 hours, rushed for 250 yards, were the more physical team. Case McCoy slinging it all over the place. And Texas beat OU like 36-10 or 36-20. And they dominated. They dominated
Yeah.
the game. Malcolm Brown running it. Jonathan Gray. Might have been Jonathan Gray's best day as a Longhorn.
They dominated in the trenches too.
Right. They were the more physical team.
Mhm.
At some point, it's just a manhood thing.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, Tope Mati, you're 367 pounds, whatever. At some point, you just manhandle that guy in front of you. You just, I mean,
Play like you're 367 pounds. Don't
exactly.
play like you're 250.
Right. And know what the snap count is. The pre-snap penalties continued against Baylor in critical situations, right?
Mm.
Leading up to the fake punt. They had 3rd and 6. Tope Mate false starts. It's 3rd and 11. You got to change the play call. Now you're in a tougher situation. They don't convert. 4th and 11, fake punt, disaster. And Taylor, I thought I asked the players today if Steve Sarkisian said anything to them about calling the fake punt. Because that's a I don't trust you move, right?
Mhm.
That's a I don't trust someone. I don't trust our offense or I don't trust our defense, but I feel like we've got to do something crazy here, trailing only 3 points, try to convert 4th and 11, and he didn't. The
Yeah.
players said that there was no mention of the fake punt on Sunday when they met for their meetings and practice and everything. In fact, Steve Sarkisian today said, we're going to go for 4th down every once in a while. And our
Right.
defense has to be ready to play sudden change.
Right.
I mean, he kind of hung it on the defense for
That
giving up
was yeah.
the 3-play drive.
But and that was one of the I think one of the first moments, Chip, in my opinion, at least when Steve Sarkisian said that, where I was kind of like, you're setting your defense up for failure in that situation too. I mean, you can blame whoever you want, but if you're, the offense isn't moving the ball, you're going to make the, punter run it 26 yards to get a first down at midfield. That's a risky move regardless. I mean, if it was 4th and 1, then maybe you fake it. I don't know. Maybe that's better because he only has to get 16 yards instead of 26 for a first down. And that I was taken aback because that was one of the first times that it seemed like Steve Sarkisian was trying to excuse his way out of a poor decision. In my opinion, I don't know if you felt that way too. But that was my takeaway when he said that.
Yeah. And I feel like the look, the players, Moro Jomo today, he was asked about, Brees Hall last year saying they may have 5-star players, but we have 5-star culture. After
Mhm.
Iowa State came into Austin, a game Texas was leading by 10 in the third quarter,
They
went
were
for
yeah.
a fake punt
Mhm.
and it
That's right.
failed. And the momentum swung from that point forward in the game. Texas was leading by 10 and went for a fake punt.
Yeah.
It failed. The momentum swung, and Iowa State ended up winning the game. And Brees Hall says they may have 5-star players. We have 5-star culture. Moro Jomo was asked about that today, and he said he won. He gets to say whatever he wants.
Yeah.
I just hope we stop the run on Saturday night, is what he said.
Yeah.
And hope is not a strategy, Taylor. I mean,
No.
these coaches need to put these players in position to make plays. And then these players have got to impose their will if they're ever going to see the light of day for this season, which has already slid into you saying, as we open the show, do they want to go to a bowl game?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not
It's
bowl eligible. They need 2 more wins to become bowl eligible.
And I think
And
there's 2 winnable games left on the schedule. There's for sure one. I'll say that. There's for sure Kansas. That's a good thing that Texas does have that. But there are, I mean,
yeah, Kansas and
Tex
Kansas State are home games.
yeah, and Texas has been in these games. I mean, it's not like they're getting pummeled from the jump, and maybe that's what they need, Chip. I mean, maybe they need to get punched in the throat a little early in games to wake up. I don't know, but something has to change. We shouldn't be talking 8 games in the season and saying, "Does this team want to go to a bowl game?" That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I even said that, and it's
Right.
sadly the truth. You know.
Right. Because this was a team last year that was 7-3, would have been 8-3 if they didn't have their Kansas game canceled by COVID.
Mhm.
And if they would have beaten Iowa State at home, they would have gone to the Big 12 championship game. And in this year, they're 4-4 and wondering what hit them after playing well enough to get up early on 3 ranked opponents. And, you know, Casey Thompson was asked today about there's been so much turnover, right? Like, how did last year's team go 7-3 and have a third quarter lead on Iowa State to go to a Big 12 championship game? And this year, Texas is 4-4 and can't seem to get out of its own way. And he talked about the turnover.
Mhm.
He's like, it's a new staff, it's new schemes. Some players are still trying to figure it out. And I felt like part of that was the receiving core,
Mhm.
because it's clear Jordan Whittington and Xavier Worthy have grasped what they need to grasp. Doesn't seem like anyone else in that position group has.
Right.
And the offensive line is not getting better. Are they trying to do too much? Remember, Steve Sarkisian talked about we want to do more. The more you have to defend, the the harder it is for the defense. Maybe they just need to go to a wide zone scheme like Baylor
Yeah.
and and play laterally. Um, Whatever it is, this offensive line is not getting better. Bijan Robinson was just held to his season low and is no longer the Big 12's leading rusher. Brees Hall is.
Right.
So there are areas of this team that are getting worse, not better. And we always say the sign of a well-coached team is week-to-week improvement. And, I asked the defensive players today. I asked Derek Kerstetter today, where are you seeing improvement? And there's a pause.
Yeah.
And this is that stretch right now. This is that point in the season. We talk about crossroads and okay, there are levels of crossroads. Okay, we want to play for a Big 12 title. Okay, even after you lose to OU, we want to play in for a rematch. Oklahoma State, you lose. Well, now we need some things to happen. You lose that, you lose to Baylor. Now
It's a
we
dead
just got
end.
we just got to
Yeah.
get better.
Yeah.
And you know,
That's
this,
going this way.
and that mindset, that culture. I mean, now we're talking about the culture of the program, Taylor. Is the culture under Steve Sarkisian, did it relax to the point where this team isn't tough mentally and physically late in games?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, you always hear people in football say your strength coach is your culture coach because they're around the players more than anyone else. And Steve Sarkisian was asked about his strength and conditioning today. And he said, we have all the monitors. We can see how the players are doing and they're not tired.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're Giving up
So
is what. Yeah.
they don't have any confidence, and
Yeah.
it's your job as a coach to instill your players with confidence and belief no matter what's going on. I remember Matt Rule in that 1-11 season, he kept telling his team, "Listen, I see progress. We're going to break through. It's going to happen." And little by little, it happened. And his
Right.
teams were tough. They played physical from the beginning. That part I'm not seeing. And, Steve Sarkisian says we're going to be a dangerous team when we finally get over the hump. But we
Yeah.
got to get over the hump.
Yes.
No, tell your team we're going to get over the hump. Don't tell
Mhm.
them, you know, we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
It just feels like everybody's looking at everybody else for answers, and I thought it would be a different sound today, and it wasn't.
Yeah. And I will obviously culture is not something that happens overnight. I mean, Steve Sarkisian has said that. And that's not coach speak. That's actual, that's how it goes. And there's a lot of reasons why coaches in year 1 don't find a ton of success because the culture really isn't instilled, perfectly by the time the season starts. But that's for everybody. And that, at this point, excuses are no longer going to be accepted, I think, because it's 8 games into the season. You're whether it's accurate or not, obviously the culture is not there. And I do think that they will get there, but you can't just throw your hands up in the air and say, "Oh, well, it's not going to happen this season, so let's just skate on through the rest of the 4 games on the schedule." And I agree with you. I didn't necessarily feel that there was a fire or an edge on Monday coming out of that. And you want to hear that. And it starts from the top up. And it starts with Steve Sarkisian. And, if he's kind of, I don't want to say he's pointing the blame because I don't think that's accurate. But like, the comment about the fake punt call and them saying the defense has to do its job there. It's like, well, the offense wasn't doing its job at all. And that's, the defense was doing well early in that game. And it started to crack or, crumble and then ultimately crack. And so I don't expect excuses at this point. Excuses. I expect a coach to just say what it is. I mean, Tom Herman was a jerk, but at least he talked real sometimes, and sometimes he said stupid things where we're just in there like, oh gosh, but still, like, you don't want to hear excuses when things are going south. And that's what people did say a lot about Tom Herman, too, is when things start going south, he started pointing the blame on anyone except for himself. Steve Sarkisian has to take accountability for this right now, Chip. And him admitting that was his play call, the fake punt was his call. It wasn't like a wrong decision by Cameron Dicker. It was the call. And it's like, there's just a lot of head scratchers, and you don't expect that, from midway through the season, coming out of a bye game or bye week, and also when you just drop the, back-to-back games the same exact way that they essentially dropped Baylor. Like we may sound like, more doom than anything else, but it's just kind of like watching that Baylor game. There was no part of that game, I'll say this, that I felt that Texas was going to win. Not one part. Even when they were up by 10, didn't think that was going to happen. I just thought that. And I start to think, is this the way that the team is playing? Like, okay, we have a lead, but we're going to lose this. And if that's the way that it's playing, you need Steve Sarkisian to erase that mentality from their heads. And you need the players to step up. And that's why, going back to the leadership thing, I feel like it almost has to be Casey Thompson. And the defense needs it too. DeMarvion Overshawn, I mean, he's what, a Butkus Award semifinalist? Like, he's earned his stripes. He's got to be the one that's also saying stuff too. I mean, that's just it's non-excusable for these upperclassmen that have been on campus. I mean, they were both in the same recruiting class. The defense needs a leader to step up, whether it's, DeMarvion Overshawn, Keandre Coburn, Josh Thompson, whoever it may be, they need to step up. The offense needs someone to step up. And I don't necessarily think it's going to be Bijan Robinson. So it has to be Casey Thompson. But ultimately, the fact that we're having this conversation right now, Chip, just makes you really wonder what's going on inside this locker room, what's going on inside these players' heads. I mean, we could be totally wrong in our assessment of what's going on behind closed doors because we're not behind closed doors, but it just seems to be the same story, different week. And that's not a good place for Texas right now at all. And they're especially about to go on the road against this Iowa State team. Iowa State is not as good as they were expected to be, but they're still a good team. It's not like there's some scrub. And if Texas goes and gets absolutely demolished, then what happens next?
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State is number 1 in the Big 12 in pass defense and number 2 in run defense, and they have a legit assassin um, as a pass rusher in Will McDonald, who has 7.5 sacks, is incredibly disruptive. Another blue collar find for Matt Campbell, and they still have Mike Rose at linebacker. They've still, they still have John Haycock as their defensive coordinator. So they can do what Baylor just did.
Mhm.
And I expect them to do exactly what Baylor just did
And they may do
because,
it at a better level, a higher level too.
right. So, everyone's getting more and more comfortable um, with gambling to stop the run and forcing the Texas passing game to beat it. And the Texas passing game got off to a great start against Baylor. And then in the second quarter, it was one. I mean, Steve Sarkisian is right. There was an opportunity to break that game open. You're in Baylor territory 3 times. You have you drop a touchdown pass, and on the very next play, the ball goes through the hands of that receiver for an interception. And then on the next series, that receiver fumbles the ball in Baylor territory, the Baylor 26. There was at least 17 points, you could argue, that were left on the field if you count the throw that Casey Thompson missed to Xavier Worthy when he was wide open.
Right.
So it's it's little plays here and there, and then I'll disagree with you a little bit. In the third quarter, the offense comes out, puts together a 14-play drive that takes 6 minutes off the clock. You're like, oh my gosh, where's this been?
Mhm.
They're mixing it up. They're eating the clock. They're going down. They score a touchdown. They're up 11. And then the defense gives up a monster drive,
Yeah.
75-yard drive, 4 minutes off the clock. And you're going, well, they're not tired. I mean, they just had all of halftime and 6 minutes of football time, which is 30 minutes of real time to rest up and be fired up and protect that 11-point lead. And they get gashed
Right. Yeah,
by a
that's a good
quarterback they
point. You're
turned
right.
over twice in the first half.
Mhm.
So, again, you look at Baylor's coaches, you say, well, their adjustments are working.
You can say that
And
about every coach that the last 3 games, every team.
especially the other team's offense
Mhm.
against the Texas defense. And look, the Texas defense played more single high safety than it's been too high till you die for Pete Kwiatkowski. And even when his corners were playing well, I thought Josh Thompson, Darian Dunn had good games. It wasn't like they were getting beat deep. They didn't get beat deep in the passing game.
Right.
At some point, you're going to have to take some chances to stop the run because if you're giving up the run, you got no chance.
Yeah, your teams run to throw to
And
open up
you've
the
got,
passing game.
and speaking of run, you've got to run Casey Thompson more.
Yes.
Steve Sarkisian, I know you don't like to run your quarterback. Casey Thompson scrambled for a 25-yard gain. The guy can get you 6, 7 yards here and there. I don't care if it's a QB sprint out, run pass option, bootleg, whatever. You've got to incorporate more quarterback run into this offense to force the defense to have to account for it. Right now, defenses are like, Sarkisian doesn't run his quarterback.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not coming. This week, I would put it in. I would
Uh-huh.
put it in, and I would say, hey, all those running plays you learned under Herman, we're going to put 3 of them back in this week, and we're going to use them. And we're going to use them in the fourth quarter. I mean,
Yeah.
or I don't know. I mean, it's like they unload their playbook, and then all of a sudden they're looking around in the second half.
Yeah. Well, and again, like we said this after the game too, they don't need to run him like they don't need Casey Thompson to be Sam Ellinger as a
No,
running quarterback. They just need to have people respect him and his ability as a running quarterback because it's respectable. It's not. It's not asking, say, a David Ash to scramble or something like this. I mean, Casey Thompson's a natural born athlete, and he may not be the fastest guy out there, but Sam Ellinger was not the fastest guy out there. But Casey is, I think, a lot more, shiftier, I would say, probably, and not just barrel on through. But you don't even need him to be a Sam Ellinger, but you need people to respect the quarterback running game. And there's no reason to right now because it's not utilized. I mean, at all. And it needs to be. I agree.
Remember Colt McCoy in 2008? Colt McCoy was the leading rusher
Mhm.
on that team. Colt McCoy.
Yep.
Yeah, he set the NCAA record for most accurate, highest completion percentage in a season. He was also the leading rusher for Texas in 2008. They had a poor offensive line, they had poor running backs, and Colt McCoy got it done. I mean, I voted for him for the Heisman in 2008. Hands down, he was the best player in college football.
Yeah.
But it's time. I mean, it's
Mhm.
time. You've got to make some changes that are going to give your team a chance. And it's just, we've kind of been saying they need to run Casey Thompson more for
Yeah.
3 weeks, and it's not happening. I mean, he had the 25-yard scramble, and it just reminded you that, gosh, that's a pretty good weapon right there. He just covered, a quarter of the field. Imagine if you incorporated some plays where they have to account for a bootleg or a waggle or a run pass option, sprint out, where Thompson has the option to run. And that's something that, we'll say it again, good week to do it, because Iowa State's defense is legit. I know they just got lit up by West Virginia, but Jarrett Dagey, that's the bad news for Texas. Jarrett Dagey, the quarterback at West Virginia, is throwing the ball all over the place. He leads the Big 12 in total offense, and West Virginia's, starting to figure some things out. So, and Texas has to go to Morgantown in November
Right.
this month. So, Taylor, is it going to be a November to remember, or is it going to be more of the same? And everybody's resolve, from the coaching staff to the strength staff to the players, has to change this week, or this rut is not going to be broken. Um,
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Yeah. And good coaches don't just coach to their scheme, they coach to their players' ability. And if Casey has the ability to be a running quarterback, Steve Sarkisian's got to get it out of his head not to rely on it, or not rely on it. That's the wrong word. Not to utilize it, because I don't think that you have to rely on Casey Thompson to be, the team's leading rusher when you have Bijan Robinson back there. But it's time that he's got to get probably outside of his comfort zone a little bit and trust in the player's talents that he has at his disposal until he can get his prototypical quote unquote type of quarterback that he likes to have in his schemes. But you got to coach to your players. You can't just coach your scheme and expect the players to fit perfectly into it. That's not, especially as a year one coach, you can't rely on that. Your scheme may have worked at Alabama, your scheme may have worked at, USC, at Washington, wherever he has been, but your scheme's not going to work taking over a program if you don't, have the personnel to run it. It's just like when Mac Brown in 2010 was so out of his mind that Texas lost Alabama from a power running game. And so Mac tried to make Cody Johnson like the power running game. And you're like, huh? Like that is not his strength. Like, just because you say you want to be what just beats you doesn't mean you have the tools to do it. And I think that it's kind of a similar situation right now. Is you may want to be the Alabama offense. Obviously, everyone wants to be that if you can, but you don't have the tools to do it right now. So you got to get outside your comfort zone a little bit. And I think that starts with utilizing opening the quarterback running game more.
well, and I know Steve Sarkisian's a California guy. He's pretty laid back. He says the word cool a lot, but he needs to ask himself, what would Nick Saban do?
Yeah.
After 3 straight games of getting double-digit leads, what would Nick Saban do? Nick Saban would be breathing some fire at this point and saying, I'm sick of this. How about y'all?
Yeah.
We're going to give you a great game plan, and then y'all just go out and destroy the man in front of you.
Mhm.
And let's get out of Ames with a win and change the course of what's left of this season. Um, all right, Taylor, let's get to some love it or leave it.
All right, we will take a really quick break before we get to love it or leave it, but stay tuned. We have some more football talk coming up, including something about the transfer portal that we think Texas should be utilizing right now. So, with that teaser, stay tuned. We will be right back. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will not be taking a break. We will just continue rolling on here. And make sure that you do subscribe to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. We are expanding our video product at Horns 24/7. You definitely want to check it out. We're going to be adding a lot more features in the coming months. So just go to youtube.com/Horns 24/7. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and also be sure that if you're listening on our audio podcast, that you head on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating, review, say some nice words. Hopefully, our bosses read that and will like what they have to see from you. But we'll read some of those reviews here next show if you go onto the iTunes page. So, with that said, Chip, you ready for some love it or leave it?
Let's do it.
All righty. My first one for you is love it or leave it. This year's Texas team is more creative on offense, but lacks the physical and mental toughness of last year's Texas team.
Yeah, I'm gonna love this actually. And I do like what they do on offense. I like the way that they start games, and I like the fact that they're a fast starting team. They get up on teams. Um, I think there has been a lot of creativity offensively, and then I do think this team lacks the mental and physical toughness of last year's team, and that's
Mhm.
disappointing. That's disappointing because Sark is a good guy, right? The players like him. He relates to them. He keeps it real with them.
He's a good
Uh,
coach too.
he's
I
a good
think he's
coach. He's a
yeah.
really, really talented offensive mind. But you've also got to be able to, ignite these guys and challenge them, not embarrass them, not you know, call them out, not embarrass them, but challenge them. As the coach, you've got to find a way to bring out that, as my man Dan Neal said, football is legalized fighting. You have to bring out the fighter in each of these guys, and that's on the coach.
Mhm.
And so, that's been a little disappointing because I said for years when Tom Herman was here, I said, the one thing you can give Tom Herman is his teams are tough and they play physical. You rarely could ever say that about Mac Brown's teams. And now we're back to saying that about Texas, and that's not where you need to be. So I'm gonna love that, Taylor. How about you?
I'm gonna love it too. Yes, obviously that this team is way more creative on offense. And I do agree it does lack the mental and physical toughness of last year's teams and of, a number of teams that Tom Herman fielded. And in saying that, Chip, that, in my opinion, when we talk about how physical and mentally tough those teams were, especially last year, there's 2 guys I point to, and both those guys are gone, and it was Sam Ellinger and it was Joseph Osai. You never thought that you were not going to get 100%, 110%, sometimes 200% effort from those 2 guys, and it goes to show that that type of player leadership, both on the field and off the field, and vocal leadership, it can be contagious. And I really do feel that this team's lacking that. And I think it starts with losing guys like that, where there's an example of a player. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not really sure right now that I can point to one player that I would say Bijan Robinson's probably the only player that we could probably point to. You're going to get the max effort especially if he has the ball in his hand. And the players around him, that it's not contagious right now. And if I look at the offensive line, if I was an offensive lineman and I had that guy running behind me, I'd be doing everything I possibly could in my humanly power, to make sure that I not just block the person in front of me for him, but move them so that he can go, because he could go so hard and he's so talented. And I just don't know if that's really what you're seeing on this offensive line. I don't know if there's that fight of this guy. I mean, Bijan Robinson is totally out, probably out of the Heisman race right now. And it's because a lot of it because of his offensive line. And how do you go to sleep at night if you're an offensive lineman, knowing that your lack of development and your lack of want to, and your lack of physical and mental toughness means that one of the best players, if not the best player in college football right now, probably will not get an invite to the Heisman? I'd be pissed. But I don't know if there's players like that. And I think that comes from mental toughness. It comes from physical toughness. And, you know, if there's, it's clear that I think a lot of these guys probably relied last year more on the key players to be the mental and physical tough players, because they were difference makers, like a Sam Ellinger and a Joseph Osai, and even a Sam Cosmi. I mean, those are three players that obviously are in the NFL right now too. So that doesn't help that Texas. I don't know if I can point to three players who will be in the NFL next year right now. But yeah, so I totally agree. I'm going to love it and say that this offense clearly is more creative. It's much better. It's much improved. But the lack of physical and mental toughness across the board is, I think, almost contagious, and not in a positive way like it was last year.
Yeah. All right. Love it or leave it. Number 2.
All right. Number 2 is love it or leave it. Texas 3-game losing streak is more on the coaches for not adjusting to opponents' adjustments than it is on the players for not imposing their will at the end of games.
I'm going to leave this because I think it's on both. And I think this is a joint effort. This goes top down. Coaches, strength coach, and more culture from the strength coach than these guys are strong. I mean, it's about having confidence to execute what you're trying to execute. And that's what's mystifying to me, is that we're not seeing that week to week progress, especially like you said, with a running back like Bijan Robinson, who can turn a poorly blocked play into a touchdown,
Right.
because he's that talented. But defenses have zeroed in on the keys of what this offensive line, in poker, you look for tells. The defense has identified all the tells of this offensive line when it comes to running the football. And that's why I think you have to run the quarterback more, because you've got to give them something else to look at. They figured out, a lot of the motions, the shifts, and what's coming after it. But it's a joint effort. This is all up and down the board. And you mentioned, Sam Ellinger and Joseph Osai, and those guys were big time players in their final year of college football for Texas. And Casey Thompson, as we said, is 6 starts into his college football career. He has 2 more years of eligibility after this. I think he's getting better, and I think he's a player who's played well enough to win. In 2 of these 3 losses, he definitely wasn't good enough against Oklahoma State. But Sam Ellinger had some tough days too. He had a tough game as a freshman against Oklahoma State. So,
The true freshman, though, as a 18-year or 17
right,
or 18-year-old, not as a 21,
right. But
22-year-old.
you still have to get out there and see these defenses. And I will say
Yeah.
this about the Big 12. The Big 12 has some legit defenses this year. I
Yeah.
mean, we can, we thought TCU was going to be rough. TCU was nothing compared to Baylor or Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma was gettable in the secondary, and Texas got them. I mean, scored 48. Absolutely should have won that game. So and Iowa State is number 1 in pass defense and number 2 in run defense. It doesn't get any easier. So that's why the resolve has to kick in now, and it's got to be from top to bottom. How about you, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it too. Because I agree it's on both, but you go into the Baylor game. I mean, what the heck's a coach supposed to do when the ball hits a player's hands and he
Right.
doesn't catch it? I mean,
Right.
is he supposed to run off the sideline and catch it for him? The players were in position to make plays. And I know, like, people were questioning, like, why, and we talked about it too, even after the game, why is Marcus Washington not getting better? Why are there these drop balls? I mean, there's only so much a coach can do. If it's a coach's job to put a player in position to make plays, and it's a player's job to make the plays, execute being in that position and making the plays. And I think that you're not seeing that a lot of times. And it's at critical moments and it's game changing moments. And so I think obviously the coaches do have some of the blame too. They've got to do a better job of making adjustments to their opponents, in game adjustments. But at the end of the day, if the players aren't going to, execute and make the plays, the coach can only make so much before there's unless they're just taking the field themselves. So yeah, I'm going to leave it and say it's definitely on both, and it's especially, in my opinion, on the players to execute and make plays when they are on the field.
Yeah, remember Xavier Worthy dropping everything against TCU?
Yeah.
Bounced back.
Yeah.
You don't expect 2 of the 3 receivers who are on the field to have that day on the
Yeah,
same day.
for
And
sure.
that's what happened. And
Yeah.
I mean, you could look at those 5 plays right there. The 2 drops by Joshua Moore, the 2 drops by Marcus Washington, the fumble by Joshua Moore, and say, if those plays are executed, Texas wins the game.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. And I used to hate under Charlie Strong's teams, you always heard about like execution and we've got to do a better job executing. Like I was like, if I hear the word execution right now, I might execute myself because I'm so tired of hearing this
right.
word. But that's what's happening right now. I've been using the word execute more this year than I've ever wanted to use in my career after covering Charlie Strong's teams. But it's true. I mean, coaches get the blame all too often. And we've seen how many assistant coaches, how many head coaches, even, at this point in the last 10 years be at Texas. And it's like, I mean, I always think this is totally off subject. I go back to that OU game in 2019 when CeeDee Lamb is like wide open field. And I remember a certain beat writer, I'll say a personality more so than anything else. I won't call him by name, but tweeted something like, I can't, what if I told you that CeeDee Lamb scored here? Like these coaches are not doing their jobs. And it's like, I see 5 Texas players around CeeDee Lamb. Like what was supposed to happen? Craig Niver and Jason Washington run from the press box and tackle him for them. It's like, no, I see 5 players in position that didn't make a play. And that's kind of what I'm getting, like little flashbacks, random, totally off topic there, but I'm getting little flashbacks of that this year. And a lot of people are blaming coaches where it's kind of like, what, I mean, is
Yeah.
Andre Coleman supposed to catch the ball? I don't know.
Well,
Maybe he is. Who knows? Does he have the
you know,
eligibility left from his K-State days?
I had players tell me that the Texas OU series goes in streaks.
Mhm.
And if you get on the wrong side of it, it can be really hard to turn because of the atmosphere of the Cotton Bowl. And if you're the losing team in a losing streak, the oh, here we go again factor is really strong.
Yeah.
And it takes a group that has lived through that pain that finally reaches their senior year that says, enough,
Yeah.
we're going to end this. And that's what finally happened for Vince Young and that Texas team after 5 straight losses in the OU series.
Right.
And
So,
I feel
yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is a tiny microcosm of that. These 3
Mhm.
losses where you've played well enough to show you can win the game, but you don't win the game. You finally have to stand up and say, enough. And
Yeah.
so we'll see if this happens or not. No
It's like
player only meetings, Taylor. The players said
no.
there's been no player only meetings. So
Good.
haven't
Good.
reached that point
Good
yet.
job,
We're
guys.
gonna have to figure it out during practice. All
Oh,
right.
man.
Love it or leave it number 3.
All right, my final one for you, Chip, is love it or leave it. The position Texas will hit the transfer portal the hardest this offseason is the offensive line.
I'm gonna love this. And I think Steve Sarkisian kind of hinted at that today. He was asked about offensive line recruiting. They only have 2 O-line commitments. And he said, we were stunned. They only had 2 offensive line signees last year.
Right.
And he said, typically you're taking 5 every year. And so, yeah, I look for them to hit the portal hard in the offensive line. How about you?
Yes, I agree. I'm gonna love it. 100% they're going to. I mean, there's still some big, key offensive line recruits that are still out there. And Steve Sarkisian obviously didn't mention them by name, but hinted at the fact that, there are some still on the board who have not made their commitments and they're very well in the mix with that too. But there's no denying that they need help on the offensive line right now. And relying on incoming true freshmen to be the help right now is usually not what coaches do. And so I would be surprised if I mean, they may sign five still and still hit the transfer portal, honestly, because I think that they need immediate help. And no coach wants to rely on the true freshman starting on the offensive line. That and quarterback are the two positions I feel like need a redshirt year because it's such a different game from high school to college. So I 100% agree. I think they're going to sign as many as they possibly can if they can get some of the big name guys out there and listen to the state of recruiting. Our guys will cover more on that, especially with some visits coming up here in the month of November. But yes, 100%. I would be absolutely shocked if Texas did not add at least a couple of people from the transfer portal on the offensive line this offseason.
That's right. Stay tuned to the state of recruiting. I mean, it's as ugly as it's been on the field. Recruiting has been very interesting.
Yeah,
And Steve
and it hasn't
Sarkisian said,
fallen off too much.
yeah, Steve Sarkisian said he's happy with the way recruiting is going. So that's if that's where the future of the program is, and we know it is, then stick with the state of recruiting and make sure you're checking that out. Check out the Blitz as well with Jeff Howe and Rod Babers. And until next time here on the Flagship podcast, we hope if you're not a member of Horns 24/7, you'll become an annual member and reap all the VIP benefits of all the team sites and the preeminent college football and basketball network, 24/7 Sports. And make sure you're subscribed to the 24/7 Sports, the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel.
And
Subscribe.
24/7 Sports. Josh Pate gets enough credit, so we don't need to. No, I'm kidding. Make sure he does great stuff too. So Horns 24/7 first, subscribe, 24/7 Sports second.
And make sure that you tune in to our Flagship podcast interview previewing this week's game against Iowa State. That'll come out on Thursday. For Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Thanks for listening. And until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.